Hello to everybody. Welcome back to the Non-League Network Beyond the Final Whistle podcast. And today I'm joined with by Alex Smithies. Alex is someone that I have known for many, many years, but who has never heard of me until very recently. And someone who I used to see on Championship Manager and Player Manager as a goalkeeper for a number of clubs like Huddersfield, QPR, he was at Cardiff and finished his career at Leicester. And Alex has now transitioned into a very different world, but he's still interested in what happens with sports personalities. I'll let him explain what his new career is all about. But as a first, thank you, Alex. Thank you for joining us. Someone who's come up to, I think, nearly 500 professional matches. Congratulations on an amazing career. And thank you for joining us this morning, Alex.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's... life's looking a little bit different these days to 18 years in professional football. I'm still sort of utilising my network within football and working with footballers, albeit in a completely different capacity in financial services. So we're trying to support players and sports people during their careers, but importantly for me, after their careers, because I know how quickly it can stop. And the nature of the industry, you're still very young when you finish that career. Lots of people have dependents, and it can be quite an expensive stage of life when people come out of professional sport with children and things like that. So I'm keen to help people. I've seen firsthand friends that I had in football that are having really difficult times now. So I'm really passionate about helping people and showing them that there's a lot of life to live after their sporting careers, and it can also be a great one.
How old were you when you finished?
So I was 33, nearly 34, and that it seemed like it happened quite suddenly, but actually I had quite a nasty knee injury when I was around 20, and my knee was just becoming more and more difficult to deal with year on year, and I had time to mentally prepare that my knee was going to be the thing that finished my playing career. In the end, I finished sort of mid-season after my final knee surgery. And stepping away when the season's still going was quite strange. But I knew I sort of had a good idea of what I wanted to do after I finished playing, and I've made sort of put things in place in order to be able to live a nice life after my playing career as well.
Brilliant. That's exactly what we'll be looking at and talking about today in the podcast. So you started off your career, you went through the Huddersfield Academy, England under 17, I think it was, for the FIFA World Cup as well. I saw something about that. So you're going through the academy, you're coming through. We have got some podcasts of academy staff and players who are going through that at the moment. Went into Huddersfield, and as you mentioned, a few seasons were affected by injuries, even early on. So at 20 years of age, how did that sort of affect how you saw your long-term career? Did you start planning for a transition outside of your career quite early, or was it something that you left later on?
Yeah, so the early part of my career was going perfectly well. So you touched on, I was involved in the England youth setup. So came through Huddersfield and managed to become first choice goalkeeper at 18, which is quite rare. Exposure to those England youth team matches, and things were going great. And then when I was around 19 or 20, I had quite a nasty knee injury, and I was out for 11 months, and I'd never considered what I would do after football or how to prepare for that. And that seems incredibly young for most people to be considering retirement, but I knew I had a sort of a finite amount of money that I could earn during my career, and there was going to be a lot of life to live after it. And I actually almost retired at 20 due to the knee injury. I managed to turn a corner and end up going on to have a decent career in the game, but that was a big wake-up call to me. And often players don't have a reason to think that far ahead. Clearly I did with my knee. So it was almost a blessing and a curse. It allowed me to think ahead and plan accordingly, but also it did negatively impact my career in that I had to retire earlier. I had constant knee issues, multiple surgeries, that sort of thing. So blessing and a curse, but now I'm away from the game. I'm quite thankful actually that I had that wake-up call so early.
Yeah, to be honest, I think looking at players who go into professional football, there are very few who actually make it, and those ones who are lucky to make it, then it's really, really important not to get injured or not to put yourself in a situation where you stop getting picked as well. So that's quite an interesting one, because we within the non-league network, we look at the difficulties all the way from professional, Premier League, all the way down to your Sunday league players. If you get injured, you then get replaced. You're not suddenly going to start playing with 10 players because there's only, you're the only one that can play in that position. There'll be someone else who come in, and when you're fit again, well, they're not going to step aside just because you're fit. And that's something that we look into. We've got a couple of mental health specialists who help us on the non-league network to explain, well, you've got to take your time, you've got to prove yourself, you've got to get in there. You've obviously done that because you had some seasons where you played every game. I think there was a season at QPR where you played every league and cup matches, and that's post-injury. So you've obviously come back to a level where you're able to do that.
Yeah, I think you sort of touched on how cutthroat football is. You will be replaced immediately if either you're injured or you're not performing. So it's incredibly cutthroat in that respect. And I think you touched on, I did have a couple of seasons in my career where I played every game, and I can tell you now there was no way that I was not injured during that season. But understanding the reality of the game, that you will be replaced if you're not available. I had to play through injuries, sometimes rightly, sometimes wrongly. I remember playing games where I was really ill and I'd just taken paracetamols and ibuprofen and just tried getting on with it. Obviously, I risked not performing, but I didn't want to lose my place because people behind me were pushing me to get into the team. And, it's tough. And if you are forced to come out of the team through injury, it could be a long while, especially as a goalkeeper, before you get your chance again.
So we're obviously going to talk about the financial aspect, but this is quite an interesting one for me throughout your career. What goes through your mind when you're on the sidelines? You're injured, someone else has come in, because they're not going to play without a goalkeeper. That person's going to do everything they can to prove themselves, even if they could be your mates. I'm sure you've had, you've played with people like, I think Rob Green you played with as well, and Jed Steen, people like that. So you will have known them for a number of years because you might be through the same academy, not in this case, but playing under 21s and things like that. How do you keep yourself motivated? How do you keep yourself focused on, I need to get fit and I need to get back in there?
I think if you get to the professional game, you're an inherently motivated person. So I think naturally that drive is already there for the people that get to that level. With injuries, it's a little bit different because often day to day you're working and trying to stay motivated to become fit, but the wins seem so small. It's not like on a match day you can perform for 90 minutes and you're celebrating a big win and everything's going great. It might be putting an extra 2.5 kilos on a leg extension, for example. So being injured, the motivation is tough because you need to make so many small steps in order to be back fit. I think as a goalkeeper, it's quite well talked about, the goalkeepers union. So we are a tight-knit group, and I think that comes from, we all understand how difficult the job is. So for a striker to have a good day at the office, he doesn't need to touch the ball, but if he scores a last-minute winner, he's man of the match.
Yep.
A goalkeeper, it's about not being noticed and not doing anything wrong. If you've done nothing wrong, you've had a good day at the office. So I think goalkeepers get how difficult the job is. So within a group at a club, there might be 3 or 4 goalkeepers within the first team. We are supportive of the other goalkeepers, absolutely, because we get how difficult the job is. Also, we want the team to do well so that when we're back in the team, there is a bit of momentum to help us. But ultimately, you don't want them to be keeping clean sheet week after week. You're out of the team, and that's another. We all get that. But I think it's sort of a unique world, the goalkeeping world. I think we think slightly differently to the outfield players. They can be in and out of the team quite often. So it's a completely different psychology. We want the team to be doing well when we come back into it. We want the team to be winning, but we don't want our friend to be doing particularly well in goal, and that's just the industry.
I mean, we're going to talk about contracts in a second, but one of those things that I've seen with goalkeepers is, I know some keepers will go somewhere, and I mean, Scott Carson's a perfect example. They'll go into somewhere and know they're not going to get on the pitch, and if they do, it's just as almost like a last resort. So goalkeeper will come in and be second or third choice. They're highly unlikely to get much of a look in. When you're second or third choice as a right back or a striker, you might get 20 minutes, half an hour in a game, but as a goalkeeper, you're not going to be getting 20 minutes at the end of a match, because that's not unless there's an injury or someone's been sent off, you're not really going to get that exposure. So you're signing contracts knowing that you might be second or third choice. You're signing contracts knowing that you will have to look at the financial aspect, but also your playing career. So one of my questions on here is, you're a financial expert now, and you're someone who's had to look at your career very early on, thinking, I'm limited potentially by my injuries, so I've got to look at my contracts carefully. But when a professional player signs their first contract, what kind of mistakes have you come across? Obviously, you might know this more now, but did you really understand your contract straight away? Was it something that you let the agent deal with, or was it something that you were very fully aware of, exactly you're getting the best you could possibly get?
Well, I think initially, first professional contracts and early professional contracts, you're guided by the people around you. These are young people that have very little life experience, and I was no different. Unless you have lived it and breathed it and been through multiple contract negotiations and moved clubs and things like this, you have no experience. So you are reliant on the people around you to do best by you. Ultimately, you'd like to think that families want the best for their players, and agents normally do. There are agents out there that have bad reputations. I think we're all aware of that. There are also good agents, but no, I think the people that are signing these contracts they're often quite lucrative. Are actually in a really vulnerable position, because there are people around that know they can earn through them, and if they don't have that person's best interest at heart, there are going to be decisions that are made and clauses and things like that within the contract that might not be in the best interest of player. And that's where I sort of want to help guide those younger guys and girls, because I've seen it. I know what good looks like, and I know what bad looks like, and they're incredibly vulnerable and they need help.
Right, perfect. So what do you actually do for players and ex-players? Is this something where you can guide them on the contract, so you can guide them on understanding it? Is it tax positions? Is it long-term planning? What is it that you would focus on?
So in terms of actually contract signing with a club, that's not something that we would deal with. That we're not agents. We don't want to be agents. We want to stay in our lane. So agents do their thing. They try and earn the best contract for the player. At that point, then we want to sit down with the player and the family, maybe their agent as well, and create a financial plan for the player that can be sustained for a long period of time. There are no quick wins in financial planning. I think most people who take interest in this will understand there are no quick wins. It's about sensible planning for a long period of time. Yeah. And I think players are guided by the people around them, and they spend a lot of time with guys in the dressing room, which also have no experience in dealing with large sums of money, and they can easily be carried away in doing what everyone else is doing, and that may be good and it may be bad. But I was a client myself with Brooksport, who I'm working with now, throughout my career. So I sort of learned and was educated what I was doing, the reasons for doing it. And now I want to help pass that on to the other players, and they need to understand exactly where their money is. So initially it might be the guidance of parents and agents to help put these people in place. But ultimately, by the time they retire, if they have a good career and retire at 35, they need to know exactly where their money is, the reasons it's there, and the purpose for doing that, and how their lifestyle is going to look after they've played. So we need to educate them as well.
Yeah. I mean, that education is for me, there's different stages. I work with a training company called Penstock Training, and we work with players and clubs in that transition. To me, I call it Civvy World. because it's very similar to the military, it's very similar to the police and other forces, where throughout your career you'll have agents, maybe nutritionists. I mean, look at Cristiano Ronaldo and his like his entourage. The guy is incredible, but he's done everything to keep his career going as long as he possibly can, with having people around him who are guiding him through various aspects of it.
Yeah.
When the career stops, any involvement from a club tends to disappear as well. That's something that I spoke to a number of players who've just basically said, yeah, club says bye-bye, off you go. Same thing happens in the army-ish and the police-ish, where you go into civvy world. So everything was almost decided for you or supported for you.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you're on your own. So what happens when a player kind of leaves the game? So at your stage, you were early to mid-30s. What happens from the day that you said mid-season, okay, I'm done? Then what? What was that reality for you?
Yeah, so my example is about as cutthroat as it gets. And yeah, this was no surprise to me, because I was in my 30s when this time came. I knew what was coming. I knew how I would be treated, and I knew that you were quickly forgotten about. So I had a surgery. I went to see my surgeon. He said, "You're never going to play again." At that point, I went to see the director of football at Leicester and told him that I've been told to retire by the surgeon. I think this was around December time of mid-season. And bear in mind that from the age of 8, I'd been in the academy system, sort of institutionalized. I played almost 500 games. I lived and breathed football. I'd moved all around the country. And all he said was, right, how much money do you want to leave?
Wow.
And there was no compassion. There was no, I'm sorry it's come to this, that, everything's coming to an end. And, there was no compassion. There was no sort of, what do you need from us? And it was no surprise to me. And they almost, I did expect it. I expected it because I understand the industry. And I know that they will quickly move on without you. So that was the information I got. At that point, I stopped coming into the club, and that person didn't contact me again, but lawyers did, and lawyers were sending me emails. And then the day I actually retired and we agreed sort of to cut my contract short, I was sent a heads up. This is the social media post that we're going to put out, just saying that you're leaving the club, and that was it. And all of a sudden it was done.
Oh wow, that's I mean, I don't think you played. That was Leicester, wasn't it? So you didn't play many games for Leicester.
No, I didn't play.
I mean, you're in a position where, compared to most professional players, you knew earlier on that your career would be affected by injuries. You had that kind of mentality. I need to protect my finances, because that's what you've ended up going towards anyway.
Yeah.
As you said, you knew. I mean, you still managed to have a career that took you into your 30s. Some players don't make it that far in terms of injuries. But even then, I think, and I can see from your face, it was an absolute shock to just kind of be gone. Thank you, bye-bye, off you go. How much do you want? What support was there? Did the FA have any support for you? Is there a PFA? Is there any kind of, did your teammates suddenly reach out to you? Or I mean, you didn't mention the coach. This was director of football. Was there a structure in place that went, don't worry, Alex, you're not going to play now. You're done. But this is what happens afterwards.
I'd love to say different, but I have to be honest with you. There was no support for me there. I reached out to the PFA. The PFA didn't reach out to me. I've not spoken to the PFA since. The club haven't contacted me. From the day I left, the club never contacted me again. Obviously, I had relationships with members of staff and players at the club, so I still was in contact with, those sorts of people, but those weren't decision makers. Those weren't people that, could offer support. And for myself, I've always been fairly independent. I touched on the fact that I wanted to educate myself about my finances. So I knew I could look after myself. Yeah. But I look at other players who are more vulnerable than I was, and they rely on, being told what time to do this, what time to do that, how to live your life, when to eat, all these sorts of things. what happens for them?
Mm.
I think there should be so much more support there. I'll be honest, because I'm so independent and I've always wanted to be that way, I took control of the situation, but I think for many players that just simply won't be the case.
No, and that's something. I mean, there are partly that's one of the reasons why non-league network exists, but that's down at the lower end of the leagues. But even at the professional level, it's been the case for ages. And I was talking to Nicky Forster about it for a number of years. I've done a podcast with him recently, but that transition just isn't there. It's something that's lacking. It's not just football, actually. And I know you're a financial kind of support or planner, not just in professional football, but for professional sports people. So it isn't just in football. It's something that exists in other industries where you're not protected afterwards. There is not a really smooth transition. And one of the things I know we said we were going to talk about is money struggles, because if you're planning for the future, as you said, you were always looking at, you may have investments, you may have a number of properties or a number of financial investments in place. But the reality is, I would think most players don't. And when you look at the cars and the flashy houses, the flashy cars and holidays and the lifetime they're leading, sometimes there's no planning at all. It's just, I'm earning this much, so I'm going to spend this much. Why do you think some of them actually struggle with it? Do you think there's any, is there a link between playing professional sports, not just football, and not planning for the future? Is there something that you've seen with your teammates, or because you'll know a number of people who have gone bankrupt? I mean, that's the sad reality of it. Is there something that you see within the mentality of a sports person, or is it just a reflection of society? I don't know if that's maybe a difficult question for you to answer.
Yeah, I think a little bit of it all. I think the fact that this is a bit of a generalization, but in my experience, a lot of footballers come from working class backgrounds. They might not have been exposed to family members that have been astute investors or had financial planners. You know, if you think of the world of rugby union and cricket, where generally these people are coming from families within professional backgrounds, they may have been to private schools and things like this. Football is not like that, and I think their exposure to people that are good with money is probably not the same as rugby union or cricket. And also a little bit, footballers are generally all or nothing. You know, they're all in with football. The reason they get to be in the top footballers is because they put everything into it, and they almost drop everything else. And one of the parts of everything else is financial planning. And another aspect is these people are in the 20s generally when they're playing at the peak of their earning potential. And most people in the 20s aren't good with money. Most people in the 20s can afford to spend everything they earn, possibly a little bit more, because they're on a career path that they could work until they're 60, 70. And financial mistakes can be repaired along the way as they mature and they gain more experience. Football earnings are front loaded, and by the time you're 30, you're on the way down, and there's a lot of life to live after. So there are a number of factors why I think sports people are underprepared financially. And I think within football, which is obviously my area of expertise, if you're playing in the Championship or the Premier League, you should be financially set for life from age 35, whether that means you never have to work again or investments supplement your income that you go into in another job, another industry. But that's just not the case.
Yeah,
it's not the case.
So that's the thing is a lot of people who are watching this podcast are looking at it from a non-league element anyway. But when you hear professionals saying, actually, you know, even professionals, they're not set up, they should be. And some of the money that you hear about is just tremendous. I know the reality isn't always how you perceive it and how you see it. And you hear these, you know, ridiculous amounts of 100, 200, 300,000 a week. The actual reality is very different, and the outgoings and the outlays and so on, and the lifestyle you're living. But for a number of our listeners, and people watching this podcast, they're coming from a non-league element, so they're probably going to be part-time, or just playing on a Saturday and getting paid. You talk about anything from 50 quid to 100, 200, 300, maybe a bit more. And there is an income from football, but there's also an income from, you have to have a job, because if you don't have a job, you just can't keep going. The difficulties they've got in this sorts of financial planning is they've got to try and find where the work of the football is. So I'm talking to someone who's playing in a team locally to me now, but he has to travel for about an hour and a half just to go to training in the evenings,
and
then play at the weekends. But during the daytime, he's trying to work on something else, and he's trying to balance that. So is there a way that you can help or advise players who maybe are having to work on a part-time basis to plan for their future, because football and that extra amount of money they're getting is going to disappear eventually? What is it that you would advise them? What kind of steps do you think they should take? Should they contact you, or are you only for professionals? How does that work, Alex?
I mean, I think generally we will be working with professionals, but I think there are a lot of tools online to help people manage their money. And also, I think budgeting is one of the biggest things we do. And we talked on, generally we're working with higher end footballers. I think all people would benefit from writing their budget down each month and seeing it in ink, what it looks like, going through their bank statement, seeing how much they're actually spending. I think that applies to everyone at every level. It's a simple habit, seeing what comes in and what goes out, and it can make you a little bit more diligent and question things that you are buying, because we're all a little bit wasteful at times, paying for those coffees that you don't need to kill some time, things like this. And I think generally, that the one rule of thumb is write down exactly what you're spending. I think a lot of people it'd be a bit of a wake-up call to them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that is true, and I've seen it in a business world. You tend to spend what you earn. So whether you're earning $1,000 a month or you're earning 100,000 a week, you tend to not necessarily think about the long-term planning, and you're a lot of people are struggling at the lower end of income. But to me, there's an element of budgeting, trying to see what you could save on and look forwards in terms of financial survival. Now, what do you think that like traditional kind of advisors, you don't know that? I mean, your expertise in professional football, what is it that you bring into it that like a normal financial advisor might struggle to see in their instance?
Yeah, well, I think most financial advisors are dealing with people in careers that they expect to last 30 or 40 years. And within football, there might be a period of 6, 7, 8 years where your earnings are at the peak, and then they fall off a cliff. So spending what you earn, especially at the higher end of football, is not the right thing to be doing. And to maintain that lifestyle after is almost impossible, and that sort of leads to all sorts of difficulties. People trying to get quick wins, gambling, drinking, all these sorts of things. And our planning is bespoke to the world of sport. We are part of Brooks Macdonald, which is it's a wider company, and they deal with business people, people within financial services, lots of different industries. And their planning looks entirely different to ours, because we understand the nature of sport and that it's career earnings are front loaded and then it falls off a cliff. So there are lots of things that we do. One example would be within professional football is to try and have your mortgage paid off by the time you're 35. Now, lots of people would not think that's the right thing to do. They would think, invest money and, beat the interest rate that you're paying on your mortgage. But we understand that the biggest expense for most people is generally going to be the mortgage. And if that can be boxed off and taken care of, it's a massive weight off your shoulders by the time you're 35. And that's just one example of how we differ.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. But actually, I didn't even think about it. Just on a personal level, was your mortgage paid off by the time you finished?
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was, it's always, you know, we set objectives for players, and one of them being debt free by the time you retire. Because if you're having to stump up, you know, well over £1,000 a month for a mortgage payment, and your career earnings stop overnight, you need a bit of time to retrain, experience other industries, and find out what you want to do. And that may take a period of years. For a lot of players, it'll mean they need a period of 2, 3, 4, 5 years to build up the skills to earn well in another industry.
Yeah.
And you know, to have the weight of how that mortgage being paid off by the time they've finished playing, that can be the difference for them.
Yeah, I mean that's just a very simple thing to think about, but it makes so much sense. We're going to be probably finishing off in a minute or so. I just wondered, how can existing players contact you and past players, because you're obviously managing people who are still in full-time kind of professional lifestyle, but also people outside of that who might be a little bit older and who might have retired a few years ago. How do people contact you? What do they look for? Are you on the social medias? Is there a particular post?
Yeah, you can look at all our social media. It's Brooks Sport. We're part of Brooks McDonald. You can also go onto our website. And Patrick, if I can ask that, you know, give you my details to sort of leave in the description for this. You know, I'd be grateful if anyone wants to chat, wants to discuss their own situation, then please reach out.
No worries. I'll do that. I'll also put what we're doing on here is we'll put the podcast on the Non-League Network website, and we also have on there various different trade services products as well. So I'll put on there some links, and you can always add those on as well, because it's useful. Whether you're a player playing for Gillingham in League 2, or you're playing for Folkestone in whatever the league that they're going on at the moment and they're flying, or you're playing, you know, at Huddersfield. There are various different paths that you need to be aware of in life. And one of them is, if you're going to be making a career out of football, it's not going to last forever. It's just not going to be one that, you know, you can't keep playing. I think Miura in Japan is an exception. And there's a couple of players in the UK who are approaching 50 and 52 and going, well, you know, I'm 50 and I'm nowhere near finishing my career. And that's something that allows me to plan for my future. But if I was a professional player, I would have had to think about that maybe 15 years ago. And that's quite a scary thought. So really appreciate your time, by the way, Alex. And I genuinely do mean it. I think it was when you were at QPR and I used to play on Championship Manager, and you were one of those where your stats were really, really good. And I suddenly thought, well, you know, he's a bit of a bargain at that. So just so you know, you had an even better career on my Championship Manager.
I'd like to see what my stats would be these days. I don't think they'd be quite as good.
So yeah, I mean that is something that you know, it's always a pleasure for me to talk to ex-pros, and I look forward to catching up with you. We're going to be running some other ones in probably the summer and autumn time, where we'll have various different professionals and ex-professionals and supporting services joining into a much larger podcast environment. So we'll have I'll then send you an invitation for that as well. But I really appreciate your time this morning, and great to talk to you. And I'll put all the links for our members to have a look at.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. Cheers.
Thanks, mate.